friend Jim here with JB's Big Adventure, coming to you from Lake Chapala, Mexico. And yes, just as the title shows, this is going to be all about kind of an update crime-wise of what's taking place here in Mexico. Now, what's really interesting is I think everyone that's from the States or even from Canada is talking to folks or talking to their family. Then when they say Mexico, it says, are you crazy? You're looking at going to Mexico? What about all the cartels? And it's a knee-jerk action, I would say. And what's a knee-jerk action? Let me give you another example. Oh, so when I was with Mercedes-Benz and people would come to the lot, the majority of customers I had come to me were all people I'd prospected: dentists, lawyers, attorneys, doctors. But when you go onto the lot and the salesman meets you and he says, hello, how are you? And what do you say to him? Yeah, just looking. So I think it's a knee-jerk reaction that actually comes when somebody says they're looking at going to Mexico and how unsafe it is. And, it's just one of those things I think that are really, really ridiculous when people, in fact, talk about that in that way. But let me just share some information with you to basically put some things into perspective so you'll be able to get more of an understanding what it's like here. So, like the title said, crime in Mexico worse than the U.S., and is it safer to be in Mexico than the U.S.? So, crime in Mexico is no joke. It happens. As a matter of fact, last year there was 47,000 drug-related murders in Mexico. And, and by the way, those were not two Americans. These are cartels. These are, all drug-related incidences. 47,000. So is there crime in Mexico? Absolutely. It so happens that we were actually about an hour away from Mexico's second largest city, which is Guadalajara. We're actually a mile high from there, up in the mountain range. And so what I wanted to do is I wanted to share some information that I actually got by doing some research online, updated research from, I shared some things last year, but this is some updated stuff that I did been working about the last 2 weeks on this. So here's what's interesting. A study that I read said Texans are twice as safe in Mexico than they are in the States. 3 times safer if, in fact, you live in Houston. I thought that was funny. In fact, what they say is, and it isn't just Texas, it's all across the country. So I'm going to give you some numbers again. 86.4% of homicides last year were linked to drugs. 64.2% of murders and homicides was drug related. The cost of taking care of crime, $129 billion is spent on police actually protecting the country. 86 billion in corrections, 10 billion in drug offenders for counseling and such. So what's really important to remember is who lives here at Lake Chapala. It's the Mexican people, the poor Mexican people, but it's a bunch of old fogies. I mean, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, folks that aren't necessarily involved in drugs in any way. I've only had one person actually ask me, maybe 2, about if they were able to bring marijuana down. And I said, that ain't my call. I mean, you need to, that's outside my pay grade. You need to do some checking on that. If it was me, I would not. But, I just let them know they needed to do their own research, contact the airline and such. Okay. So remembering that here at Lake Chapala, it's a bunch of poor Mexican people and also a bunch of retirees. So in the States, 91% of people that were polled said that Americans believe crime is rising at a steep pace. 2023 over 2022, crime increased 17.7%. From 2021 to 2022, it increased 12.2%. And these studies were all taken from 47 of the largest cities in the States. The rate of increase for overdose deaths was actually up 27%. So, some other numbers for me. It's been 2 years since there's been any kind of a murder here around Lake Chapala. Now, about 45-minute drive from here, there was a drug transaction that was taking place. From what I understand, just from what I was able to read from some police records, was that it was actually like a drug dealer and cartel involved. It was not an expat. I have not seen anything about an expat being murdered, killed, shot since we've been here for 3.5 years. Now, 2 years ago, I reported a shootout. Now, what was interesting was I had people telling me, because we were actually up in the States at the time, and I had people telling me all kinds of stories, that there was a ton of police vehicles going down the carretera, heading east towards Chapala. They heard there was this big shootout, and it was a big mess. And people were actually saying that it was cartel gangs fighting against each other. And the question I have is this: when do you ever hear about cartel gangs fighting against each other and nobody gets killed? Nobody was killed. Nobody was injured. Yes, there was a bunch of bullets that flew, but there was a report done about a car that had been stolen. The stolen was, from the best I could tell, from 3 expats that were in their early 30s. And the police were actually called out for it. They went to where this address that they were told that they thought the car was at, and actually the garage doors were open. And there in the driveway, they saw a stash of ammunition and guns. So they called in the cavalry. Everybody showed up. And there was a bunch of shots being fired. Nobody was killed. Actually, those 3 were apprehended and actually taken into custody. So that was something that was a big deal here. But that's what the truth was. Now, I realize that Facebook gets some of this stuff and they just blow it up big. But that doesn't mean it's truth. Because people like to take the stories and they like to make them even bigger than what they need to be. So what I share is the main thing is just realizing that a lot of that, when it comes to crime, isn't necessarily involving any expats. So looking at gun violence. In the States, per 100,000 in population, the numbers in the U.S. are 1,987.8. For Mexico, it's 105.2. Lake Chapala's last murder was in 2018. Was that 2000? No, it was early, later than that. I want to say it was just after we started our channel, and that would have been in 2021, so 2022. So it must have been 2 years ago when that was. So there was one that was actually in 2018 also. But again, those were not killings with expats involved. They were drug related, cartel related. U.S. ranks #1 in crime in the world. You are 140 times more likely per 1 million in population to be murdered. And 92 times more likely, no, I said that wrong. I am sorry. I see I wrote 2 things on here. 140 times more likely to be murdered per 1 million people than you are in Mexico. And Lake Chapala's had 0. This these two killings I'm telling you about were both on the other side of a mountain from here. So it's in our area, but it isn't right here at Lake Chapala. When it comes to rapes, in the States, there were 11,874.4 rapes. In Mexico, 127.8. Lake Chapala, 0. The U.S. is ranked number 4 in the world for rapes. For murder, rated per 1 million in population, 92 times more likely in the U.S. per 280 times 0.6 per million in capita in regards to population of where that might be. In Mexico, it's 42.1 per million, so it's even lower. There were 4 questions. There was a survey that was done in 2020, and it was surveying expats. And they found that 95% of expats felt safe to live here and did not live in fear. Isn't that interesting? 95%. 2 groups see Lake Chapala and want to keep it clear, clean, and safe. 1, the people that actually work here, that are involved in businesses that are involved with the expats. They want to make sure that the expats stay around. The second is actually the local government and also the other communities. Here's why. Because the expats, we bring in over $500 million annually in revenue, totally generated by expats. So both benefit from the expat communities. The crime lords, whether it be cartel or whoever it may be, know that crimes against expats would be investigated from U.S. and Canadian governments, and there would be serious problems for the cartels. So what they do is they fight amongst other cartels. So as of mass shootings in the States, and I'm closing with this, and a mass shooting is at least 3 people have been killed. As of August 31st, 404 mass shootings and 1,755 people were killed. Now, I don't have the exact numbers of people that were injured because sometimes there's also those. It was an 8% increase over last year. Senseless shootings. You can't go to church, to the restaurant, to the mall, to school, grocery stores, Walmart, even in the car, you can get shot. Our country's in a mess. The world's in a mess. But our country is, there's a reason why there are a lot of expats from the States and in Canada that are moving down to Lake Chapala. It really is an expat haven. It's a wonderful place to be. I'm here right now here at the Chapala Malecon and looking over the lake. I mean, the lake is just rising. I can just tell where it's at. We've been at a real low up until the rainy season, which has been wonderful. The weather out here, the temperature, normally I would be sweating big time and I'm not right now. And I even rode my bike over here. So in closing and wrapping this up, remember, people are going to say to you, you're moving to Mexico. What about this? Or what about that? Or, well, what about the 404 mass shootings in the States? That's killed 1,755 people. What about all those shootings? And it was 8% increase over the last year. And on top of that, we're protected. I mean, you see the police presence all the time, whether it's the trucks. I mean, I'm looking at here and I see them here. The trucks, the cars, the vans. There's also federales that are actually in the back of the trucks and they've got their machine guns. And I'll just tell you, I do not at all feel afraid here. Now, being a believer and being a Christian, that also has a lot to do with it. But, you know, when you think about something a whole bunch and you think about it, and you talk about it, you tell other people about it, you think about it, those kind of things happen. But you don't have to think about it because this is a totally different place. So friend, I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope that you really saw that in the numbers that, you know, being here in Lake Chapala, Mexico is nothing like it is in the States. Nothing like it is in the States. One quick example, Barbara and I were actually in Albuquerque a year ago. It was a year ago this month. And could not believe the crime rate there. Albuquerque, New Mexico, where I'm from, I could not believe the amount of crime. When you come to a place that you don't hear about it, you know, it's because we're a bunch of old fogies. You know, there's those of us that are younger. I'm 63, so I guess, well, I'm old to some. I'm old to a 3-year-old. But yeah, this is just a great place. And again, friend, I hope that's been helpful for you. I hope that when somebody says to you, "Oh, Mexico, what are you talking about? Are you crazy?" Just realize it's a knee-jerk reaction. So take it easy on it. And just make sure you come anyway. So friend, as always, thank you so much for being a part of this channel, supporting this community. We really appreciate you. Have an awesome day. We'll see you on the next video.